internet, the American dream seems to be alive and well in many places, except America. My name is Matthew Kroll.
No comment. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies. This week, in particular, the only podcast about the documentary film from Michael Moore, Where to Invade Next.
Now, let's get into that for a second. It's amazing I have a question to begin with after following a statement, but the question is, documentary. Do you think this film categorizes
we'll get into that. We'll get into it. Let's do some housekeeping. Shahir, you love housekeeping.
I do love housekeeping, except my wife will tell you I don't.
So for those of you who don't know us, hello.
Hi.
Namaste. This is our little show about movies where we talk about a film each week for about an hour and sort of break it down for you fine folks and let you know if it's worth your time and or money. We both kind of come from different backgrounds, don't we, Shahir?
Oh, yes, we do.
What are those backgrounds? Pray tell.
I like long walks in the park, holding hands, sunset. No, okay, never mind. Okay, that was a bit. That didn't go very well.
I'm just going to let you crash and burn.
Oh, God, you suck. I am a filmmaker, originally from New Zealand, now living in New York City. I tend to be, and this is not my own words, but I hate fun, apparently, says someone sitting across the table from me.
Oh, I love how you're trained.
I tend to be slightly snootier. I guess more of the esoteric version of film going.
Whereas I embrace fun and love all things ridiculous and, dare I say, marvelous. And just really enjoy most films that have something awesome to say or show me something truly spectacular. Which is fine. We're a little bit different. And listen, that's what makes the world go round.
If you like or dislike our little rambles about movies, you can always reach us at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter at onlymoviepod or on our Facebook, where Matt and I will argue vociferously about the Marvel Cinematic Universe for some unknown reason, and we're not going to mention it in this one podcast. Let's go back to that first question I asked. Do you think that this is a documentary?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. You have to say it's a Michael Moore documentary.
Right. I'm not sure it's a document. I'm not sure he's documenting as much as he's
documenting a lot, I think.
I think he's giving us an opinion about with some empirical evidence.
Well, fun fact about documentaries and documentary filmmaking, everyone's giving you an opinion.
Of course, there's no such thing as objectivity, but I think this one steps slightly further into propaganda more than most. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a problem.
Sure.
I just want to be careful when we use the term documentary about when we're referring to this film. I would say this is more of a...
The style is documentary filmmaking.
I guess.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with the propaganda type thing, but to be honest, and this might be me being a little cynical towards everything, all things are propaganda. Like, granted, there are different levels, and Michael Moore is known for really pushing his will in his documentaries.
Yeah.
But I think he's just, what's interesting? I was going to say what your feelings of Michael Moore are, but mine are just like, I've never minded him, but I also know what I'm getting, so I prep myself accordingly. And he's just never been ashamed of the propaganda-esque type things. He's using propaganda. He's using a tool that's normally associated with evil to try to do something good.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, is that it's weird because if you were to argue what side of the Michael Moore argument are you on, I'm always on his side generally.
Sure.
I'm pretty much...
And you've seen most of his movies? I've seen most of them.
I think I've seen pretty much all of them except for a couple of the more recent ones. I've seen half of Capitalism, A Love Story.
Yeah, I did not see that one, but I've seen Roger and Me, Bowling for Columbine, Sicko,
Fahrenheit 9/11.
Yep, Fahrenheit 9/11.
And Capitalism, Love Story, then this. And so what do you generally think about Michael Moore?
I think he's important to exist.
Yeah.
I think
you can say that about any human being.
No, you really can't. I think the fact that he does what he does is overall good. I think he's heavy-handed.
Yeah.
But I also have to say he strikes if he's making, quote, propaganda, it is aimed straight at my face and working like a charm, because until I take a step back from things like that, I always really enjoy the films. He does enough humor. Granted, in this film in particular, I felt like rhetoric was getting a little bit like, okay, I get your joke. Like something that happens a lot in this movie. There's no spoilers yet, but like he'll set up something really dire and serious, and then musical tones will be like don 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 don, and then something hilarious will happen because it's lighthearted. And like I get it. But like I'm sort of like over that. Like it's misdirection by not misdirected. I don't know. It just feels forced at this point.
Well, the shtick here is that Michael Moore, I mean, you could argue that Fahrenheit 9/11, 9/11, or whatever you want to call it, was really an attempt to push the world back against the Bush presidency.
Sure. He's got a horse in that race.
Oh yeah, of course. And
horse is a horse, of course.
And I think having seen America go through 2 terms of President Bush, and then thankfully 2 terms of President Obama, again, speaking from a left-wing perspective here, I think Moore now has more of a stake in examining particular issues that are at the core of American life.
Sure.
So sicko, the American healthcare system, capitalism, whether corporatism is the best way to run our lives.
Yep.
And this one, which I think is interesting, Where to Invade Next, which looks at America's U.S. foreign policy, but not from the point of view of like, where are we actually invading, and whether we should be doing it or not? For example, Iraq, Afghanistan, our American interventionist policy, but instead asking the question: are we fundamentally the question that this film is asking is: are we spending enough time fixing fundamental problems instead of? Or are we spending more time trying to intervene in areas that almost have no bearing on us? And the shtick here is that Moore goes to several countries to invade as a one-man army to steal the best ideas. Instead of going to Iraq and stealing oil, # not a conspiracy, he goes to, for example, Finland to look at their education system.
Right. So while I like... This is something that's interesting. The structure that you just described, I really like. It lets him touch on a lot of issues I know he feels that are important to him and to society in general. And it lets us hit a lot of places with a lot of different things. And it does a good thing that I think a lot of documentaries don't do, is it gives a wide range of shit that eventually ties together in a final point, whether you agree or disagree with it. But it's amazing the basket that it weaves to collect all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I was actually very impressed by the end of it. It just tied everything together for me in a nice sort of bow. Tons of ideas that don't always go with each other, but it are basically in the sense of, oh, here's a bunch of other things countries do in various societal, touch points that they do better than America.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the argument has to be pointed out that Moore is, I mean, fundamentally, and he acknowledges this as well, is that he is cherry picking from.
Oh yeah, well that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I think that's inherent. But I guess the question is that, and again, I'm on his side, but I'm very cautious because the opposition point of view would basically trying to apply certain ideas from other countries into an American situation is probably the wrong approach, or it could not work for fundamental differences in these two countries.
True, but at the same time, the film does mention this once or twice. All of these or most of these ideals that he does are actually American ideals that we seem to have forgotten along the way. And I'm not saying that you could take all of the stuff that we're going to talk about and that Michael Moore talks about and just implement it in America and have it work, because you fucking can't. It's an entirely different system for everything. But the fact that the ideas came from us, a lot of them.
Yeah, whether they fundamentally, in the exact way that he says they came from America is another question. So I love being here. I love being in America. But there are some fundamental things that I go, America seems to have some things just completely backwards.
A lot of things
backwards. And there's this problem that American patriotism has embedded itself into, which is that speaking out or questioning seems to imply that you don't love America. And I think we need to immediately step away from that idea and latch onto the idea that the Supreme Court has a more perfect union. So every time we develop or question or change or fundamentally alter something, we're trying to create a more perfect union.
I just think it's so hilarious when people, like, if you detract something, you say, like, America's not good at this or America's not good at that. People are like, oh, you hate America. It's like, no, if I hated America, I wouldn't be talking about it. Like, I wouldn't be dealing with, like, it's that fucking zealousy that, like, oh, well, you can't fucking have a disagreement about it or you hate it. It's like, who the fuck are, like, how is that even a thought point? But there's this weird, God, patriotism and all that is hard for me to talk about. I've never served in the armed forces. I have not served in government or sort of, I've been a servant of the nation. I love America and the things it provides us, but I also see the faults that it has. It's just weird because I never feel, as a straight white dude in America, I don't feel like, how do I put it?
The world's not against you.
The world's not against me. So, like, how do I put it? I don't know how to say this. I feel like, and this isn't a oh poor me. It's just, this is sort of what it is. It's like, because it's totally not poor me. Trust me. It's just like I don't feel like I have the validity to say much because I haven't done anything.
Well, it's weird that you
cultural, like, country-wise.
It's weird that you said that, you haven't served in the military and you haven't served in government, and therefore, like, patriotism is a hard thing to say.
Well, it's hard for me to fault people. Like, if someone's overseas fighting for us and they say something zealot even like about, like, well, that's not American or you're questioning America, even though I disagree with them and I think that's wrong, I do think their opinion, even though I think it's wrong, in a weird way has more validity than mine.
And it's really difficult to push back against this idea, but there's this notion that if you're a soldier or you're fighting for America or something like that, then you are a true patriot of this country, and therefore you should be given the priority. And I think it was Bill Burr who said something along those lines. He was like, listen, 10% of the population are assholes, are just douchebags and assholes. Are you telling me that 10% of the military service aren't assholes?
No, but they're doing something. Even if 10% are,
you're contributing to society as well. And here's the thing: is that I think being a patriot doesn't necessarily mean that you're always on side of America. It means that you love your country. And the people in it, and you're willing to work towards making it better for those people.
Well, something interesting that happened with this movie,
and that can be that can be tiny. It can be contributed. I feel like I'm a patriot of New Zealand, but like I'm very loosely associated with New Zealand these days, and I haven't done much for the country. But New Zealand is in my bones. You know what I mean? So I think it's a really tricky thing to push back against this idea of patriotism.
Yeah.
And I think, but I hope that in the conversation we're about to have in terms of the issues that we think are present in America, that they don't come across as unpatriotic, and they're reasonable questions. And I think even for if you're not a fan of Michael Moore and his modus operandi of quote unquote documentary filmmaking, you can still see the validity of someone questioning, raising these questions without having to push back against it with a blanket remark of non-patriotism.
Right.
So that's kind of where we start the conversation. And, if anything, what Michael Moore is great at is enabling us to start the conversation. I mean, I think, the thing is, I've lived in the United States on and off again since the year 2000. I went to college here, then I went back home.
In the year 2000.
And the thing that struck me immediately when I was here in the year 2000, it's the first issue that's going to come up. Well, it's actually not in this film, but healthcare.
Sure.
Healthcare.
He did a whole movie on it. So
he did a whole movie on it, so it's not fun. It is brought up in this film, but not explicitly.
There's specific moments.
So healthcare is something that I just think, having come from a country that has some form of universal healthcare that is not perfect by any means, but has at least the safety net of healthcare for all. Coming to a country which has an entirely privatized system apart from Medicaid and Medicare, it just seems entirely back. And the problems that I've run into with the American healthcare system are just problems that I don't think exist in the other world. And look, I truly believe the American healthcare system is cruel and unusual.
Yeah,
Like,
it's fucked up.
It is cruel and unusual to most people. And if you're incapable of navigating bureaucracy, not having healthcare in America is like a prison sentence. That it's not quite the same thing. I'm not equating not having healthcare to being in prison, but I'm just saying not having American healthcare can be a death sentence or an immediate sign of bankruptcy.
I am literally afraid to use my health insurance that I pay $400 and some change for.
That's all you pay?
Well, I have the dirt. I have the most dirt package that covers nothing.
Right. And there's an interesting point in this film, which is that he talks about how in America we call in other countries they call healthcare part of your tax package. In America, it's a private healthcare deductible, but we don't think of it as a tax. So we go, well, we have lower taxes, but we pay you pay this $400 a month. You wouldn't consider that a tax, but it is.
No. So something that I think that this. I'm gonna start with something. We said there's a lot of sort of issues that he basically travels to all these countries to quote take them over or invade them. Italy, France, Finland, Slovenia, Germany, Portugal, Norway, Tunisia, and Iceland, and eventually a little bit in Berlin, back in Germany.
Yeah.
But the things he's doing is great because he's cherry picking all these great ideas from places. But the thing I didn't like before we get into more of the actual issues he talks about is the bullshit thing he did with the flag at the end of every one. Like he's taking the flag and he puts it down. He's like, I've claimed this. I was like, you doing this? I know you're trying to be tongue in cheeky. It doesn't help. It makes me feel weird about the whole thing.
It doesn't help, but he's kind of he's playing into that shtick that he's been dealing with throughout this whole, that he will deal with throughout this whole film, which is about the fact that America has an interventionist policy for most parts of the world. And America also, Team America, World Police, has this notion of being the world cop. So him go, look, I get it. I know why it bothers you. And it is kind of after the second or third time, it's silly. But I get the point
sure.
that he's trying to make.
And seeing it from that angle, I hate a little less, but it's just ugh.
But so the first one, Italy, this idea of paid vacation and paid maternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look,
and the 13th month salary, which is basically they break down, they think they have 8 weeks off a year, just paid for by the country and the taxes that they pay so they can go on vacation. And then they call it the 13th month. So December, they get basically 2 salaries so they can afford to go on vacation, even though they're paid during their vacation.
It's actually not, well, it is paid. So New Zealand has a similar mandatory paid leave law, which is 5 weeks paid leave, but it's not. There is a contribution made by the government, and then your company pays for it.
Sure.
So for every paycheck your company pays you, they put aside a fund for your vacation leave, and then you can get that paid out if you want to as a lump sum, or you can actually take the 5 weeks off and just get it paid.
Yeah.
And the thing is that it accumulates in most places. It's legal by law. It has to accumulate. So if I don't take my 5 weeks this year, the next year it becomes 10 weeks. Then the year after that it becomes 15 weeks. And you get into strange situations in New Zealand, for example, where some people have 24 weeks paid leave owed to them. Wow. And every company has to account for that. So they have to put aside money. You can't just sort of, oh shit, I need to pay this dude 24 weeks. You have to every paycheck put aside a certain amount for that leave.
Right.
So it's not, when you say it's not paid for by the government, but it's mandated by the government, and if you are operating a business with employees, you have to have it.
And the companies they deal with in this particular film is Lardini and Ducati.
Yeah.
And the
again, cherry picking, there are
course.
labor problems in Italy. There's productivity issues in Italy. But the
2-hour lunches when you can drive home and cook.
Yeah, and that sounds amazing to me. But the one takeaway point from this that you should note is that there are only 2 countries in the world that don't have paid maternity leave: the United States and Papua New Guinea. So even though it's cherry picking from one country that probably has its own problems, every country has some form of maternity leave and some form of paid vacation time.
Something, and as we go, you'll see this more and more, but something this film does very well, I think, is just illustrate the backwardsness that we've fallen into in this country in a lot of places. Not paid maternity leave. Like, I don't. God, it's fucking nuts.
Well, it points to some like a bigger fundamental problem, which I think that Moore is pointing to, and if you agree with Moore, you will kind of see as a flaw in the American psychology, I guess, which is that America, and I'm saying this as a person who lives here, has forgotten what it means to be human.
Well, America's forgotten. I mean, they actually near the end in Finland.
Yeah.
Is that the place? The last Iceland. They're talking to some people, and they basically make the point of how, in a lot of these other countries, it's about we. It's about like the actual country and the community. And in America, it's all about me. It's what I can do. It's like, if you can be anything you want to be in America, but like they make it very, very about you, the individual.
Yeah.
Where I feel that way a lot of times. Like I'm just like. It is so weird, but again, going back to straight white man in America sort of thing, like, and I've never had a huge. I'm predominantly Polish, like I'm 50%, and then I'm sort of a mutt for the other half.
Yeah.
My ancestors loved fucking, but the other people.
Yeah.
But I don't have a strong cultural relationship or with the Polish culture, any culture really, and I've always felt a little left out by that, which is fine. But at the same time, it's just sort of interesting because take that, I have no religious or sort of historical identity, and then pump that into a culture that's basically designed to make you self-serving or like to make you're a number one Duke of New York. So it's like. It's lonely and it's very interesting because you see in all of these places that Moore visits
that there's
again it's cherry picking, but there's community, and even people that aren't natively from these places that live there like want to help these communities. It's people helping people not because they have to, and I do think altruism isn't real. I'll say that straight up, but they realize because it just makes fucking sense that if you keep most people happy and comfortable enough, it will be better for everyone. And it's something that I feel like America never really got.
Well, I think it comes down to that them versus, I versus we kind of thing, which is that if I can, create a situation for myself that allows me to take as much vacation time as I want, I can be rich, wealthy, and do whatever I want to do, then that's all that's important. Whereas I think the opposite philosophy is that if we can, and it's essentially it comes down to the fundamental principles of capitalism and classism. Middle class versus owner class and the upper class and the management class. Like in America, we have come to this idea that the management class, this idea that there's the trickle down effect. If the management class does well, then everybody else does well. Whereas the opposite idea is that if we can somehow not create an owner class that is so divided from the middle class. You see that in France as well, where they
Germany with 50% of the workers are on corporate boards.
50% of the workers are on corporate boards, but also in the cases of schools in France where it was in Finland, sorry, where they're all schools are equal.
It's illegal to have an actual paid private school for the most part, they said.
Yeah, exactly.
I think vocationally there's a difference, but because
the idea is that poorer students will be alongside richer students, and the problem,
and they'll have friends, they'll intermingle, and then that way when they grow up, the richer people are gonna feel worse, as they should, about fucking over poor people.
I don't think it's that about feeling worse. I think fundamentally what happens is that if you don't have that, it's basically reintegration of a segregated economic. Well,
that's what I'm saying.
If you don't have that,
we're saying the same thing. It's like when you finally see people as people and not as us or them. Like when you're all together. I mean, this is something I can relate to, I guess, because I grew up in Amherst, New Hampshire, which is a very affluent place. It's rich for the most part. I was one of 2 or 3 families that absolutely wasn't, and my parents decided to just work their asses off because they knew the school system was good.
Yeah.
But so I grew up low to middle class, and most of my friends were pretty loaded.
Yeah.
So it was, I saw this sort of in a way, and I it's just interesting how there'd be certain situations. I remember when I was younger, they'd come to my house for the first time and they wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not like I was living in squalor, but like,
Yeah.
It's helpful overall for everyone in walks of life to see the different socioeconomical like ranges. So you realize, oh yeah, these aren't just like 50 workers at my plant. These are 50 people.
Yeah. And I think, like the other point I wanted to make there is that if the economically wealthy are forced to integrate within a pluralistic society, then those who are more economically wealthy have an incentive to elevate the standard of living and the standard of education around them, because and inherently what benefits them benefits everyone.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I feel like, and this movie points it out in a very propagandic way.
Yeah.
But it's something that America either lost or never quite had.
I mean, look, when you have to go to because I'm a parent now, to go to the good schools costs you this much money, to go to a not so good costs you this much money. When you're forced to make it an economic decision, which it often is, it's the same with your health care, for example. To have, comfortable health care costs you this much money. To have dirt health care where you're afraid of, tripping over the carpet, that is an economic reality that I think America has just divided itself upon. If you're interested in this topic, the famous book that came out in 2013, it's an economics text, Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty, really goes into this with a lot of empirical evidence. So I think if you're watching Where to Invade next as your starting point, try the next point, if you want some empirical data and actual hard economic data about this, is Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century. And the basic idea there is that if the return on capital, so people who are investing money, is much higher than the overall economic growth of a community, then there will be inherent wealth inequality. So the idea is that if you can invest money, but the society around you doesn't grow, then you will create this division between those who create money and will keep it and won't distribute it down to, and the wealth inequality will rise.
Right.
And I think we saw this. I think there's an idea that's taken hold in American politics that you see mainly on the Republican side, which is this idea of small government. This idea that businesses can make economic decisions better than the government can. We don't want our government in our healthcare. We don't want our government telling our doctors what to do. But fundamentally, that require I think even Alan Greenspan, the former U.S. Treasury Secretary, pointed out, he was questioned on this, and he realized that there was an inherent flaw to this idea that the markets will correct everything. And he said what he didn't realize is that this trickle down effect is just bullshit. If people make money, they don't distribute it in a way that is meaningful amongst their community. They keep it intergenerationally. And so it stays within that community. And what happens is that family or community or whatever stays wealthy while people around them continue to get poorer.
And it's also interesting because the whole thing is like, yeah, you take care of your own family and da-da-da-da, like, yeah, whatever. But like they think, I feel like on a primal, stupid lizard brain level, it's like they think they're taking care of their own. And in the short term, and by that I mean a generation or two, yes, you're 100% right, you are.
Yeah.
But if you think long term, if you think 6, 7 generations, 8 generations down the line, all it's going to do is fuck you midway, and your legacy, your breed, your whatever, your family name isn't going to, like, it's not going to last like that. Whereas if you have a more societal sort of outlook on things and you realize that, if you invest in people, you will last much longer. And to the point, because a lot of these countries that he visits, like all these good things didn't just spring up overnight. The government wasn't like, oh yeah, everyone gets this. Yeah. There were governments toppled. There were protests. There were people burning themselves alive, like to make points places. And you know what I find? This is something interesting. Sorry, I'm kind of going on a tangent, but something I wonder, and I'm asking this as a question to our listeners. You can write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com, or Shahir, you can answer this right now. Do you think, because I've always been, let's talk about protesting for a second.
Right.
Protesting, I never fully, very rarely in American history lately, let's say, have protests done, they've spread awareness, but they don't I feel like there's, I don't know. Do you feel like there's too many factions in America, because we are kind of a melting pot, where it's not just the lower class going against the rich at this point? A lot of these things were oh, we weren't getting fair treatment here, that, and the other thing, so the entire country shuts down, all the women don't go to work, something like da-da-da-da, and then the government's fuck, we have to do the will of the people. I feel like the will of the people is so poisoned and splintered in America that sort of these protests, people are too, again, it's the American thing we went back to, they're too compartmentalized to do something big enough for the government to be oh, fuck.
So you could argue in recent American history, the thing that is closest to what you're describing is Occupy Wall Street. And the reason Occupy Wall Street failed or didn't, I mean, look.
No, nothing changed. Nothing changed.
Nothing changed, but Occupy Wall Street there were some successes of Occupy Wall Street. One is bringing to the forefront the idea of the 99% versus the 1%.
Which has done what, though? That's my thing.
I think it's made it part of the American rhetoric. Now, remember, change for many issues, President Obama was on the WTF podcast a few months ago, Mark Maron's podcast, and he said something interesting, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I see his point, which is that America is not a high-speed yacht. It can't tack and change directions very, very quickly,
right? Without
toppling over. It's a giant freighter ship, and in order to make change, you've got to move it 2 degrees at a time, over generations. So you could argue that the Occupy Wall Street, it was just a 1 degree turn, which created the rhetoric of the 1% versus the 99%.
And I hope that's true, but that's something that it's going to be generationally to figure out.
And the counter argument, which I think it really comes into play if you look at the Democratic primaries this year. You have, and this is broad categorization, but on the one hand you have Bernie Sanders, and on the other hand, you have Hillary Clinton. And the argument I've seen from people who are pro-Bernie, is that he is, in some ways, opting for revolutionary change. He wants to do things in this generation. He wants change to happen immediately.
Right.
Because for him, it is unreasonable to say that change can't happen, or it's unreasonable to expect people to continue to support a democratic government which doesn't support them, and expect change to happen over generations. It's hard to say to someone who's living
now,
food stamp to food stamp, that
and your kids' kids are going to be fine.
Yeah. It's hard to say your kids' kids are going to be fine, but make the sacrifice first now. And then the argument for Hillary Clinton is that she is savvy about the way the way the Senate and Congress actually runs, and so she can create,
just not computers, apparently.
Yeah, well, whatever that whole issue is, but she can create incremental change that it'll actually happen. And so my question is your question about protest, for example. I'm a person who doesn't protest often, and I wonder about whether I should.
Right.
In New Zealand, there was the last famous protest that happened was around the 1981 Springbok tour. A South African rugby team were going to come to New Zealand to play rugby in 1980, and basically the entire country, for the most part, protested against it because they wanted to take a stand against apartheid.
Okay.
And as a result, there were riots. The tour got canceled, I believe, and we'd like to say that cumulative movement helped in some way express the outrage against apartheid. It's a very proud moment for New Zealand,
right?
And I'm wondering, for my kid is if he looks back at some of the generational changes, he might look back and say, which side of that were you on? Like, did you do your part? And I don't know if I did. I tend to be, and the reason I don't is I tend to be reserved. Like, I'm, when a shooting tragedy happens and everyone changes their Facebook to reflect the status change or something like that, I tend to not do that.
Same.
I feel like, I don't want to make a big thing about it. I don't want to say I'm not doing it. I just don't do it.
Right.
Because I feel like you're picking and choosing tragedies, and it tends to be about you rather than the tragedy itself.
Your Facebook profile and your whatever if that's the way you show support, cool.
Yeah.
But also it's a very it's very American. It's very, you're turning a thing that's not about you, unless maybe it is. It's possible that some of these things truly affect these people and whatnot. But 9 times out of 10, if it's about this, that, and the other thing that you're so separated from, but you change your thing, you're making the bad thing or the thing sort of about you, even if you don't mean to.
Yeah.
And it's something that, like, I stay away from politics. I stay away from all that stuff on Facebook. I say on this podcast normally, unless we're doing a Michael Moore movie.
Yeah.
So like, it's just it's self-serving. It's American.
But the one example that's in this film that they talk about is in Iceland. Is in Iceland the women protest?
Yep.
Yeah. So the historic protest where 90% of women stopped working in a bid to create equal rights within the constitution for Iceland, and it led to the election of the first female Icelandic prime minister. I think protest is important. Protest works because it's anti-establishment, and if this, like, we have to accept there's it's even
I agree. I think protest works 100%. I think protest works. I wonder, my original question was, is America currently too splintered and too selfish to actually organize enough or under enough of one banner to actually, other than incrementally get lexicon on the public conscious, etc., make change? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because these other places, 90% of women stopped going to work. That's fucking huge. Could you imagine? I couldn't even picture 90% of any group in America doing the same thing at the same time.
Well, I think, like, the one thing is that there's been a real push to stop that. And I think it happens in a couple of ways. One is, for example, unionizing in America is really frowned upon. You even have companies like Walmart, Target, those sorts of places, like, who actively fight against unionizing, and that's the, like, unionizing is the first major form of, it's not protest but organizing.
Sure,
that's what unionizing.
You're fighting a large body by becoming a large body. That's,
exactly.
Yeah.
You're coming together, and I think there has been a real pushback against unionizing. Which I think has led to this idea of not getting involved in public politics and, protest. The second thing is, I think, like, there's even a point in here where they talk about how the American education system has removed civics from its
which is nuts.
And it's become entirely around standardized testing, and I think this active, aggressive push against intellectualism, around real intellectualism, is probably one of the reasons why we don't see American protesting too much these days. It's where people, we're not savvy. We're not organized. We don't get angry. We're still placated enough by the Kardashians to, like, as long as we're okay.
Yeah. And it's so funny because intellectualism, even throughout media, is sort of shat upon in a weird way. Like, I forget if I've talked about this in the podcast, but Friends, have I talked about this example? The sitcom Friends?
Yeah.
If you look at that character and the tropes that the characters play on that show,
yeah,
there's only one person who is consistently shit upon.
Chandler.
Nope.
Oh.
Ross.
Oh, and
here's why. Okay. So Phoebe's the hippie.
Yeah.
Rachel's the self-absorbed one. Chandler's the funny one. Joey's the dummy. Monica's the neurotic one.
Yeah.
Right? All sort of character flaws. Every one of them has character flaws. But what's Ross's flaw? Now hold on.
Yeah.
He is the smart one. He's the one that makes a brainy joke or a joke about paleontology or a science that he does. And every time there is a joke followed by a laugh track that shits on him. And I'm not saying he's not annoying and doesn't have other faults, but he is only mocked because he's smart.
Right.
There's a cultural touch point to that.
Yeah. And I mean, you can even see it
because
in a dumb show like The Big Bang Theory.
Sure.
Yeah.
But also, look at what America's number one export is.
Television?
Image.
Image?
I would say America's number one export is image, the image of America, pop culture, the music and entertainment industry that we do.
Yeah.
And what is that? We're literally just selling an image of a thing that doesn't quite exist in the same way that we're pitching it.
Simulacrum versus simulation.
Sure.
Yeah.
So like that's what people know. We're America's the greatest propaganda machine ever because it's still going.
Yeah. And you know, like you and I are sitting in a very comfortable apartment in Brooklyn talking about these issues, but there is a poverty and of a scale that you and I just don't fundamentally understand.
Exactly. And it's things like that. This is why I know we're kind of going off on broader topics than this film, but that's what this film's meant to do. We will go down a couple more of the list, but like this thing just shines light on problems that we have as a country based on smaller, probably a little less complicated countries, you know, how they fixed them. The France thing about school, the lunches in France, like schools in France, nuts. Because you look at the slop that kids are served here, and they're not learning about nutrition. They're not eating healthy. It's, you know, whatever. But even Michael Moore gives a kid a Coke. They're trying to convince people to drink a Coca-Cola, and they're like, eh. But like, and again, it's cherry picking. But it's like
cherry picking, and there is a clear manipulation on his part of the way that scene is set up. Of course, that kid knows what Coke is. Of course they know what hamburgers is. McDonald's exists in France. You know, like it's
no, and I understand that, but he's doing it. I think it's again using a tool of evil for good in this point. Like,
yeah, he's using a blunt object.
Because if everyone that's telling us awful things, like the corporations that are fucking people or the healthcare system or whatever, just you know the whatever nebulous enemy is controlling whatever is fucking us up, right? When there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
If they're using this shit, if they're using this propaganda type way to get ideas across, and it's been working for fucking ever, good on Michael Moore for taking the enemy, using the fucking One Ring and trying to turn it around. Now, there's a point it might backfire and then it doesn't quite work as well.
I think it already has on him, but again, I would much rather have a flawed Michael Moore than no Michael Moore.
Right. Yeah. But like, so the education's like the taxes, how it even said in the France thing, how like it breaks down in your paycheck where all of your taxes go, like specifically to specific organizations. Because if we saw how little went to schools versus how much went to whatever, we might be like, but instead it just says federal and I forget what the second one is. And then so like, even sex ed, for instance, France is number one in sex ed.
I have a particular thing about this because I really do think that our industry, film and television, has a real part to play in this notion that sex is bad and violence is okay.
Yeah.
Like if you go on the subway right now, it's July 2016, you will see billboards up for Jason Bourne pointing a gun at you. You will not see posters of two people having sex or, you know, like intimating that they're having sex. You know, we will not see movies that explore that issue as clearly. And on the other side of that is that we are currently in a climate of heated debate around gun violence. Yeah. You know, but then if you go down the subway, you're going to see...
There's Jason Bourne pointing a gun at you.
Yeah, pointing a gun at you. You know, you're going to see The Rock in Central Intelligence firing two guns in each hand kind of thing. And these are like standard tropes of our entertainment. And you know, and then we have this culture of gun violence that is becoming all the more pervasive now. And maybe it's just that we're seeing, you know, people have cameras now, so we're seeing, you know, in the last couple of weeks we've seen multiple police shootings, plus on the other side of it, mass shootings. So it's not the things that we were talking about earlier: food, taxes, healthcare, education. They're sort of institutional problems, but I think there's a psychological problem that we have as well, where we are being fed material and we are only willing to talk about things that we deem acceptable, and you know, like.
Yes, and I just find it so funny that we're a country that was formed based on people leaving because something that they thought, well, it's interesting. This is what I always love about in textbooks. Fuck most history classes that I had growing up because it's all fucking wrong. Like, but the whole thing we're taught. I'm not even gonna get into fucking genocide, Captain Columbus. I'm talking about the Pilgrims left England because England was too controlling.
Yeah.
No, the Pilgrims left because England didn't figure into their, like, the Pilgrims were more bolted down than the rest of England, and they didn't fit in there anymore. So we have this huge sexually repressed population coming over here, causing a genocide.
Yeah.
So instantly, from the birth of our nation, and this movie does something interesting with that too, because it talks about how Germany is doing lots of things. Like, I always thought, for whatever reason, that like Germany ever talked about the Nazis anymore.
That's just probably the one Family Guy sketch that you saw.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But like, instead, Germany teaches all about it. They make sure everyone knows about their fucking dark history 3 generations ago.
Well, that's actually recent as well, I think, and I would question the validity of how much that actually happens.
But it happens enough.
It happens enough, and I
down to the plates in front of the houses that, like, this is where the Jewish family who used to own this before you did, this is their name.
Yeah.
Before they were taken away from their home.
Yeah.
Here, kids aren't taught. And again, every country has blood on its hands, and
any Western colonized country, yeah,
sure. But like, you're taught that like Columbus came over here and then they Pilgrims and whatever had Thanksgiving and whatever. But you're not it doesn't talk about.
You don't know about the Trail of Tears.
No, no, until you get to college.
Yeah,
and I think it's important, even from a young age, and apparently in other countries they do this. The bad shit they talk about, because again, it's that, I hate the idiom, but it's like, if you don't teach history correctly, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's another thing. We have this mentality, and this movie does shine a light, even if it's a fucking blinding one, a little too strong and towards a direction. We have this mentality here that like, we're the fucking best. Woo, we can do no wrong. Yeah. When all we've done 90% of the time is wrong. Again, to err is human or whatever.
And remember, you've got there is the primary Republican candidate this year, whose name I will not mention, for he shall not be named.
Sauron?
Pretty much. Is running on this platform of Make America Great Again. And there was a woman who wore a cap that said America was never great, and she was like, I think she was almost fired from her job or something like that recently. And it's that thing which is like, okay, let's break down Make America Great Again. When exactly are we talking about? Are we talking about the 1960s? Because if you're talking about America being great again, you are not an African American.
Right.
This movie. If you're talking about the 1920s, you're not an African American. You're not a Hispanic. You're not a
woman.
Yeah, you're not a woman. So which part of America being great again are we talking about?
And this movie goes into a great thing in Norway and Portugal a little bit about drugs and the prison system, and how I never put 2 and 2 together. And like, again, this is why I think movies like this is important, because I knew both of these things that I'm going to reference existed, but I never put together the cultural reference, and maybe it's a little too pointed. The civil rights movement, and the war on drugs.
If you're interested in that topic, the documentary "The House I Live In," or "The House We Live In" on Netflix, is it basically goes into the exact topic. Yeah,
like, so the second that the civil rights movement happened, and then African Americans started getting shit done for them, and that's good. Various powers stepped in and started this war on drugs, which targeted them. Yeah. Like, and it's just another form of like whatever. And so Portugal, for instance, doesn't arrest people for using drugs, which I've always, even when I was in DARE, you weren't here.
Right.
The DARE program, which was a huge fucking failure, by the way.
There was the DARE program existed in New Zealand.
Did it?
Yeah.
Listen, we had cops come and do the DARE program at my school, and the cops were very nice, and I appreciate their time.
Yeah.
But the DARE program itself was such a fucking crock of shit.
Yeah.
Like, the whole thing, and I've always thought this since I was an adolescent, it's like, you're just fucking you and the direct people up around you based on the amount of drug uses if you're doing it to the point where it damages you.
Right.
It's not something that people should be, like, people shouldn't be locked up for fucking possessing a mediocre amount of a thing, even if that thing's fucking black tar heroin. Like,
well, they talked about like heroin basically being a way to criminalize the Asian population, because it was brought in, opiates were brought in by the Asian, by Asian workers who were brought here to work. There's even recently, like a few years ago, maybe a couple of years ago, John Ehrlichman, who was Nixon's chief advisor, said this. Literally, so we've talked about like the connection between the war on drugs and the criminalization of minorities in America. This is what he actually said. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to either be against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies and marijuana and blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt these communities. This is Nixon's top advisor talking about what the war on drugs is really about. And then for the next 20 years,
indoctrination.
You have children, like basically, there's even another comparison where crack cocaine was criminalized much harsher than ordinary white cocaine, powder cocaine. And there was a direct connection there, which is that crack cocaine was predominantly cheaper and affordable in minority communities, and cocaine was snorted by white partygoers or people who wanted, and they would not get as harsh a penalty.
Yep.
But the distinction between crack cocaine and powder cocaine is literally one process.
Yeah.
So it's impossible at this point to suggest that racism doesn't exist.
Well, of course, yeah.
And is institutionalized in America.
The thing is, too, and again, I guess straight white man card.
Yeah.
I feel like just societally, this shit was ingrained in me in a way, and I everyone. There's that funny. I forget who says it, but like everyone's a little bit racist, right?
Oh yeah, everyone's a little bit. And I personally, being a brown person, I kind of think racism has a value.
Sure, but what I'm saying is like, I'll think something, and it doesn't happen often, but enough where and then I'll be like, no, to me, I say this in my head, I'm like, no, dummy, like that's a racist, like, I'm glad that I have enough self-awareness to see the amount of indoctrination that I went through, and I'm trying to actively sort of fight against it. Yeah. And I think, again, I don't want to keep praising Michael Moore and his films because again, I keep using it. He's using the evil weapon of the enemy. He took Skeletor's Havoc staff, and now he's just fucking trying to use it for Eternia.
But wouldn't it be amazing if because I feel like that indoctrination happened over generations to get all of us at this point, and I'm guilty of it as well, without a doubt. Wouldn't it be amazing for, this is the John Lennon song, like Imagine. Wouldn't it be amazing if it wasn't actually part of our DNA anymore? Like if it wasn't.
Yeah. And hopefully, and this is the other thing too, someone brings up in this movie, we invented the greatest, I think it was in Portugal. America invented the greatest weapon, and that's the fucking internet.
Yeah.
And you're seeing this slowly happen, but there's two bad parts. That's the thing. When people come together, it's interesting because you realize that you're a global community, but the bad part is you can also sort of segregate your own groups on the internet yourself and sort of get in that sort of like
echo chamber,
and that's a bad thing. But like,
and then the other bad thing is that corporatization of the internet has already happened.
Sure.
It's
so it can happen. It's just we're not doing it. I don't know.
I feel I personally, and this is a target at myself. I feel I am too placated by how easy my life can be if I don't think about things.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think the thing that we have to consider is that in a generation or 2 generations or 3 generations, somebody will ask, where was your grandfather when this happened?
Hopefully. Yeah. That's the thing. Hopefully they do ask that. But if the country is going the route that it's going and say it still survives, people aren't going to be worried about what their grandparents thought. People aren't going to be worried about what their parents think. People are going to be too worried about whatever fucking social media thing is current, and it's going to be just about them, the individual. That's the scary part.
Yeah, and I think the only way change fundamentally happens is like the Iceland, like I didn't know about the Iceland woman's protest.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of that before.
I had neither. Or the comedian. The comedian in Iceland who started a political party called the Best Party as a joke, and people were so fed up with the actual government that they voted him in.
But remember, you gotta remember recently as well, the Iceland prime minister stepped down after the revelation of the Panama Papers linked him to a particular account. So
yes.
It's again, while Michael Moore is picking at little things that happen, there is corruption, there are problems, there are nuances that Michael Moore doesn't. Because he's trying
to. And
I
will say most every documentary does the same thing. Just Michael Moore is like heavy-handed.
Yeah, and he's trying to. he's trying to paint a big picture.
And that big picture is that we should start thinking about a lot of these small things that America sort of has basically backslid away from if we ever had it to begin with.
And like
the prison system. I don't want to. We're running out of time, but like they talk about prison systems in different cultures and how it
should be about rehabilitation, not revenge,
and not revenge. Exactly. Yeah. And business, the business of prisons. I've been watching again, and I know it's a comedy / drama, but Orange is the New Black. And this season, there's a heavy thing about the corporatization of the prison system and how it's just about fucking money. They go to Con or whatever the hell in the thing. It's a convention
for prison systems. Yeah,
nuts.
It's crazy, and it makes me sad, and I feel like I'm not doing enough to address it. But a lot of times I feel helpless. I'm not a person who would go. Hunker down at Occupy Wall Street for 3 weeks, but that's what needs to happen. It's not just like the fringe elements. It's not just like the students that need to go down to Occupy Wall Street and hunker down. Occupy Wall Street succeeds when everybody buys in.
Right. And that was my initial thing from the beginning. It's like, I don't know if the country that's the problem is everything's too splintered.
Yeah.
Group wise.
Splintered. I don't think we believe in it enough. We believe the problems are too big, and I think interestingly, it comes down to this thing in this election, which is and just on the Democratic primary, Hillary versus Bernie, and again, it's not,
even though that's kind of over.
It's kind of over now, but I think the fundamental question is, do you want change incrementally or do you want change now? And I think one candidate sort of was on the change now thing, but the question that was being raised there was, could that candidate actually implement the change that they were talking about? And the other one was talking about incremental change, which I think is less, change. We might not see change now. We're just going to see more of the status quo.
Yeah. I don't know. At the end of this film, I felt, and I think this was the point, sort of like kind of bad to be an American. And never have I ever been like, never have I ever been like, ever thought about like moving or not doing, like, whatever. But like, this was just like, there's so much wrong. And the wrap up of this film, it harkens back to The Wizard of Oz, which is a cheap shot sort of thing. But
I mean, I don't think that, again, I don't think this is as effective, or like, for example, I think Bowling for Columbine is a more effective piece of propaganda. I think this is a fairly...
This was pretty effective for me. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
Again, you have to sort of see the weapon that's being used against you in this film. It taught me a lot, even though it was from one side of a thing. But you know what I liked about this movie? This is what it is.
Yeah.
I liked it. Yes, of course, it's all one-sided.
Yeah.
But even if it's one-sided, you see there's a problem.
Yeah, I think, again, I think it comes down to that, just the statistic about paternity leave. 2 countries in the world that don't have it. And it's not a case of like, oh, everybody else is doing it, we should have it. We know that paid paternity leave helps people.
Helps people and society in general. So, Shahir, this film, would you recommend it to a person?
That's a really good question. I think it's a good primer for a number of issues, and I think I would recommend it to the right person as just an alternative viewpoint. Is it effective? I think for people who know this stuff already, it's probably just going to seem like we knew.
Which to me, I didn't know a lot of it.
Right. But like there are people I know who, I guess, haven't been made aware of this sort of issue, and I think for them it would be great. There are other films, like one of my favorite social movement documentaries is The Corporation. Mm-hmm. The Corporation is amazing, and I think The Corporation does a really terrific job of using empirical data to break things down. I think, it's cliche to say, but read Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky is a personal hero of mine because not only is he a person who is committed to data, to collecting data, and to actually, trying to affect change through data and through intellectualism, he has, he has stood at protest. He is a person who has actually gone out and made change. This is all coming from a dude who is lazy as fuck. So for whatever that's worth, Like, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, then as a primer, you'd recommend it, but not for someone who's like deep into these issues. You'd be like, yeah, dummy.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would recommend it. I think it's a really good jumping off point. And yeah, hopefully it would make people sort of start doing some research. I'm going to look into some of these things because I actually didn't have time before we did this podcast, but I already started Googling like, okay, what's the truth behind some of this stuff? Like, I want to know why, like I want to learn the dark underbelly of things next to the niceties.
Yeah.
Just because I'm interested now, and that can't be a bad thing.
No.
So I would recommend it to people to see. You can get it on demand. You could rent it from iTunes and Amazon and wherever fine digital products are sold.
It's worth a watch. It is worth a watch, despite everything I said.
Anyway, this has been the only podcast about where to invade next. Shahir, when you're not invading the human psyche, where can people find you?
You can find me at www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. You can hit us up at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter at onlymoviepod. Please do drop us iTunes reviews. We know we've been getting more and more fans and comments recently. If you really want to support us, an iTunes review really helps us out. Matt, where can we find you?
You can find me at Matthew Kroll, MatthewKrol.com for my life and works, or Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, I'm active on our Facebook page. We're going to be doing some stuff there. And if you want to find us in person, if you want to Pokemon Go us and collect us, you got to catch both of us all. You can actually come and see a live version of this podcast at PAX West this September 2nd at 6 p.m. at the Sphinx Theater. We're going to be doing something called Getting Good, GUD, at video game movies. And we're going to do a big discussion with me, Shahir, Red Charzan, and James Portnow, friends of the show, that are basically going to talk about video game movies, how they can be made better, if they've actually made a good one yet, yada, yada, yada. We're going to do a whole bunch of fun stuff we're still figuring out. So come see us there if you're in the Seattle area.
It's going to be exciting. I gotta play a lot of video games, and I got to do some research.
Oh, no.
I'm going to provide the esoteric,
the horror.
Hopefully intellectualized version, although I'm just a big dummy, so what do I know?
No, it'll be good. Hopefully in our generation, and for your son in particular, Shahir, we can figure at least 10% of this shit out before it actually starts to affect him in a negative way.
What are we going to do?
Guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.